the land where we're from is Northern Illinois, and this is the ancestral homelands of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Dawi, and the Potawatomi tribes. In addition, there were many other tribes that resided or migrated through these lands for generations. And we appreciate that they were the original people of this land. So now, let me just tell you about your two hosts for the program. I'm the chair for the River Prairie Group of Sierra Club. Sierra Club, you may know, is a large national organization. We have 63 chapters in the United States. The reason there's more chapters than states is California has 7 chapters. They're so huge. Puerto Rico has a chapter. So in some situations, there's more than one chapter. Illinois is the Illinois chapter. And within Illinois, we have 14 groups. And the River Prairie Group is one of those 14 groups. It is the boundaries of DuPage County. We have a lot of programs, and we're most honored that one of our most fabulously organized programs or committees is the DuPage Monarch Project. So now let me tell you about the DuPage Monarch Project. And in order to do that, first of all, let me thank Jeff Garris, who's our technical guy, who has made all this Zoom possible. So Jeff, I really want to acknowledge you. And now I want to mention Lonnie Morris, who is the volunteer coordinator and the inventor, the dreamer, the brainstormer that made DuPage Monarch Project a thing. And as she was thinking about the need for supporting monarchs and therefore supporting all kinds of pollinating species, she thought, how can we make a strong, vibrant group? And so our group is not just the River Prairie Group of Sierra Club. We are 4 partners. We are the DuPage County Forest Preserve System. We are the Conservation Foundation, which is numerous counties surrounding Chicago area. We are Wild Ones of Greater DuPage and the Sierra Club. So these 4 partners all sit on the board of directors and help with the planning and the activities of the DuPage Monarch Project under the leadership of Lonnie. And just one of our basic things that is the most important thing that we do is asking our local municipalities and our park districts to please sign a unique resolution to their community, a resolution that says you will do these things to protect healthy habitats for pollinating species. And I love our tagline, the DuPage Monarch Project, Communities Protecting Pollinators, because it lets you know we love the monarchs. They are a lovely flagship. They are a lovely guide. However, if we protect them, we're protecting all pollinating species. And also it takes a community to do this kind of work and working together.
Oh, nice.
So there's my introduction for you. And now I really want to introduce our speaker, our presenter. So happy that Emily Stone is joining us. Emily is going to be our speaker tonight. She is a naturalist and an education director for the Cable Natural History Museum. It's located in northern Wisconsin, and she'll show you more about that. She coordinates all the educational programs for kids of every age. In addition, she designs the museum exhibits and does a number of other things. In 2022, Emily and her work decided to do some nature-based travel trips. And the first trip was in December of that year to the Michoacan, Mexico region in Mexico, to see the spectacle of the overwintering monarchs. And it was that trip that inspired and the amazing guides who inspired her research that created this presentation. So I think it's going to be fascinating for us. I'm sorry I was in and out of this introduction. It was a little choppy for you, but I really want to thank you so much, Emily, for being with us, and I'll let you take it.
Thank you so much, Connie. I'm really excited to be here. And just a reminder for everybody to make sure you're on mute. And if you start having trouble hearing my audio, go ahead and message me in the chat. That might be the easiest way to let me know if something is going wrong. So yeah, once again, thank you for inviting me. Thank you all for coming out on Zoom. and it's wonderful to have such a big audience down there so far south. So I'm going to get started by sharing my screen. So you can see my presentation. All right, so butterflies need volcanoes. And you will find out very soon that I love connections, and I can connect pretty much anything back to geology. My last name is Stone, after all, so I really like rocks. And so butterflies, like all of us, need volcanoes and some form of geology. There we go. Gotta figure out where to advance my slide. So this is where I work at the Cable Natural History Museum in Cable, Wisconsin, and it is an amazing facility. We are in a town of 800 people, and we have 5 full-time staff members who are professionals in our field. So pretty exciting for us to be in such a small town. And we're supported by memberships and donations from people just like you. We don't get huge government grants, although cross your fingers, we'll get one next fall. We aren't supported by any municipality or government or anything. It is just donations and fundraising in our programs. And we are one of the 3% of museums that are accredited nationwide. So we're accredited from the American Alliance of Museums. We are pretty darn proud of that for being such a small museum in a small town. And we are way up in the middle of nowhere, right on the edge of the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest, pretty close to Lake Superior. And somebody in the chat mentioned the Berkey. We are also the start for the American Birkebeiner ski race, which is the largest ski race in North America, that just happened last weekend on 100% man-made snow. And as Connie mentioned, one of my jobs at the museum is designing our exhibits. And so this is a little bit of the visuals for our upcoming exhibit called Anamagun, Under the Snow. So we are on the ceded territories of the Ojibwe people or Anishinaabe people. And this year, for the first time, we have an Indigenous consultant and a few other committee members who are helping us include Indigenous science and also the Ojibwe language into our exhibit. So Anamagun literally means under the snow. And when you come to our exhibit after May 1st of this year, you will be able to shrink down to the size of a mouse and enter into the subnivean zone, which is that magical space under the snow that does not exist this year because winter has been so weird. So it's really timely. You'll get to learn about how all the animals need that space and how they use it.
Can I just add one thing? I want to ask our participants, if you have a question, please write it in the chat and we will definitely try to keep an eye on those.
Thanks for remembering, honey. Appreciate that.
Uh-huh.
So I also work on our summer calendar of events. Our 2024 summer calendar will be published on April 1st. So if you'd like to come up, as Connie said, I do make sure that we have programming for kids of all ages, which really means adults too, as long as you are excited to learn about nature. So we have about 100 public programs over the summer for our little naturalists, which are like 3-year-olds all the way up to 90-year-olds and above. So lots of great programming. And a lot of the information that I'll share with you tonight, I actually researched first to include in my Natural Connections column. So I write a weekly Natural Connections article for the museum, and it's published in over 20 local newspapers across 3 states. And also on our e-newsletter. So if you aren't from Wisconsin or from a place that publishes it, you can always sign up for our email newsletter on our homepage and get the blog post emailed to you every Friday morning at 6 a.m. And all of my articles are also archived on our searchable blog, which is accessible on our website. So if you wanted to read, I think I wrote 3 or 4 articles about my trip to the Butterfly Preserve. And so all of those actual, 800-word essays are actually in a searchable blog. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. And I record my articles as podcasts every week. So if, like me, you have more time to listen in the car than to read, they're about 7-minute long podcasts where I just read my weekly article. So all great ways to learn more about Northwood's natural history. And in this case, the connection with Mexico. All right, and those articles have been compiled into 2 books. I've been at the museum writing these weekly newspaper columns for 13 years. And so my first 4 years are in the Chickadee book, and my second 4 years of articles are in the Dragonfly book, and those are available on our website. So as Connie mentioned, we've been running these foreign travel trips for a few years. Our first one was to Costa Rica in December 2018. That's the Arenal volcano behind us. We focused a lot on bird watching. Getting jumpy. And it is very, very different subject than the butterflies, sorry. But this talk is all about our visit to Mexico, to the monarch butterfly preserves in Michoacan. And that happened in December 2022. So with all of my talks and all of my writings, as you might have guessed from the title, Natural Connections, it really is focused on how everything is connected. And that stems from this John Muir quote I learned as a young educator. When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And the more I learn, the more I realize how true this really is. And we might like to think that those connections are all sparkly and organized, like this orb weaver spider web. But in actuality, the mess of connections in our world is more like this cobweb spider web. But from those connections, a being comes to life, or each being comes to life. So that's where we get to butterflies need volcanoes within that web of connections. So this is a foray into the ecology of overwintering monarchs in Mexico. With this group, I probably don't need to review the monarch butterfly life cycle very much, except to say that what the stage in their life cycle I'm talking about tonight is their fall generation of adults in diapause who are kind of paused on becoming fully mature, but are adults and are migrating south. So every fall, one generation of monarchs emerges from their shimmering green chrysalids, sensing the shortening days, cooling temperatures, and dying milkweed, pauses their development. Instead of maturing, mating, laying eggs, and dying within weeks, they set off on a grand adventure. From all over Eastern North America, 1 billion butterflies funnel down, feeding hungrily on flowers all through Texas, turning nectar into fat reserves. During the final stage of their southward migration, monarchs sip enough nectar to increase their body fat by 500%. That fat has to last them all the way through winter, spring mating, the northward migration, and egg laying in Texas. Orange and black wings carry these tiny creatures south until they converge on a dozen mountains west of Mexico City. The Trans-Mexican Volcanic Belt spans across central southern Mexico from the Pacific Ocean to the Gulf. They divide the country and the continent. North of that belt, you'll find black bears, and south of it, you'll find monkeys. I thought that was a really interesting division. Clinging to the peaks of those volcanoes, we find magic. Since the butterflies who migrate south are 3 to 4 generations removed from the ones who last overwintered in Mexico, scientists have long pondered their navigational skill. In the absence of thick clouds, the butterflies find their way using the sun. New research shows that concentrations of the mineral magnetite in a monarch's thorax might also help them sense the Earth's magnetic field. And I have to admit that we felt magnetized to come to this place as well. And so the trip that I took was actually organized by Holbrook Travel. They did all the hard parts of organizing this butterfly adventure, and I highly recommend them as a travel agency. Your group can actually schedule a trip with them and have a host go for free, or they have other trips that any member of the public can join. And so their butterfly trips are pretty popular, and they were fantastic about finding a bilingual, actually who was trilingual or more, local guide who really knows about the area and can help make sure everything.
Emily, I accidentally muted you.
Okay.
I'm trying to catch the other people.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. That's fine. I'd rather have everybody else be muted too. Otherwise it gets distracting. So the butterflies arrived at the town of Angangeo about a month before our group arrived in early December. And we spent a day and a night in town to get used to the altitude, which is 8,000 feet above sea level. And I don't know what you guys are at, but we're at about 700 feet up here in Cable. So not very high. So I definitely noticed the altitude carrying my suitcase up 3 flights of stairs in my hotel. The town of Angangeo now bases its economy largely around butterfly tourism, but it began as a mining town. We learned that the density of the silver, zinc, lead, and copper concentrated by volcanoes and sought in the mines is probably visible in the local magnetic field. So it is no accident that Las Mariposas Monarcha and miners both congregated there. And now, of course, scientists also congregate there. You can see even on the mural in town, they include a tag on the wing of the monarch. They're very supportive of the research around them. Once there, monarchs may have multiplied the effect. Most male butterflies die on the mountaintops after they mate. Not all the females survive either, but the females who do survive carry the future north. 30,000 years worth of composted monarchs have increased the concentration of magnetite in the soil, leaving signs for their descendants to follow. Isn't geology amazing? And you probably know, but male monarchs have dots on their hind wings, where females have thick lines on their hind wings. That's how you can tell the male from the female. The arrival of the monarchs fills the sky with fluttering orange wings just at the time of the Dia de Muertos festivities. For some communities, mariposas are the souls of their ancestors returning to Earth for a brief visit. Volcanoes hold more than just navigational minerals. These tropical butterflies are intimately tied to this geologic landform that's 20 million years old. So tied that monarchs and volcanoes share a color scheme. so lava, monarchs are the same color of lava. And I thought this was especially fun because this region has a history of a lot of volcanism, my home up here. So Lake Superior was actually created by a giant rift 1.1 billion years ago. And so many kilometers thick of flood basalts actually erupted into this area. So we once had volcanoes too. And so the monarchs are migrating back and forth between 2 different ages of volcanoes. There were a lot more obvious similarities too between the preserves in Mexico and our home. I don't know about you, but this could be just about any trail near my house in the summer. But this is actually the path we were hiking up the side of the mountain toward the butterfly reserves. And there was a different species of a maidenhair fern, which I know is something that grows down by you all, there was a ragwort, a little aster species, some salvia, lots of different salvia flowers, and orchids too. So not many of these species were familiar, but their genus or their family were to me. And that was a really fun attempt at translation. Plus, there is a Mexican white pine with bundles of 5 needles, just like our white pine. And then there are the oyamel firs, Abies religiosa, also known as the sacred fir, due to the way their oppositely arranged twigs make the shape of a cross. And they are essential to the monarch's winter survival. Just like the volcanoes are essential to the trees. So the Trans-Mexican Volcanic Belt scrapes moisture from the sky, creating relatively cool, humid summers and moderate winters. Here, the oyamel firs reside in a series of shrinking refuges between 8,000 and 12,000 feet above sea level, just 12 of which hold monarchs. So this is, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but there are just 12 little mountaintops where the monarchs are known to overwinter. And these are the 2 that I visited with Angangeo there in the middle. This year, so the year we went was a decent year for monarchs, and I was really amazed by how many we saw. I'll have pictures in a little bit of how thick the monarchs were. But this particular winter was bad for monarchs. So monarchs occupied only 2.2 acres during this winter season count, and that is 59% less than last year. That is a pretty scary decrease, I think. Down from a high, an all-time high since we've been measuring it, of 45 acres in 1997. So this was the second smallest area occupied by monarch butterfly colonies in Mexico since 1993, when monitoring began. And the other bad year was 2013-14, which was the polar vortex year with all those really crazy winter storms. And scientists think that severe drought and high temperatures reduced milkweed on their breeding range, and especially there was a cold March in Texas, and so they delayed their return to the breeding grounds and maybe didn't get as many generations in as usual. So the reserves that I visited in 2022 had even lower numbers than overall. For whatever reason, Sierra Chinkwa and El Rosario, that are typically 2 of the most highly populated winter reserves, they had much lower numbers. And the Palomas way down there was the one that had the most monarchs. So it's really interesting. To me, it's almost hopeful that the butterflies are able to move around and change exactly where they winter. Maybe they knew something we couldn't tell about those mountains, the Palomas Mountains versus the other ones. But there's always more to study. And I found this information just today in this article by the World Wildlife Fund, but I'm sure somebody from your group may have even more insider information on the current status of the population. We can share that at the end too. So the cool, wet microclimates on tops of these peaks are essential to butterfly survival because being warm increases calorie use. Cool temperatures, which rarely drop much below freezing, help the butterflies conserve their fat reserves, just like being in a refrigerator. Clear springs on the mountain and fog provide water to drink, and oyamel fir trees, which are actually holdovers from the last glaciation, they find refuge on the tops of the mountains too. And now their thick boughs protect monarch butterflies from storms. And our guide, Daniel, reminded us that this is a sacred site. As we approached the groves that were just thick with butterflies, so much so that the tree branches drooped. And David, who is also, he was our guide, and he's also an environmental educator. he had us write down kind of a train of thought, just jotting down impressions of the site. And then he took our words and turned them into a poem about our experience. So I'm going to share that with you here. Soft light and soft whispers, shade shifting, sunlight through tides and flows of orange wings. Pendulous branches fluttering everywhere amongst the lush green and piercing blue. Soft rustle, flying shadows, sweetness of expanding valleys and soaring firs. Smiles, awe, joy, gracious and loving, quiet, still, and spiritual awakening, teardrops of gratitude. Fireworks, rooster and motors, and yet golden silence, caught in timelessness. A gateway to feeling, to this home, inside and out. So I was really impressed with David's poetry skills, even though English isn't his first language. And there's an interesting juxtaposition in that poem of the golden silence and also the rooster and the fireworks. And it's really striking how much of the village life from below, how much that sound trickles up the mountain. And it really reminds you that these monarch butterfly preserves are somebody's backyard, or a lot of people's backyard. And there are people who need to make a living off this land and who live nearby. And they really are our greatest allies in preserving these sites. But we also need to be their allies in those efforts as well, and make sure that the monarch butterfly reserves are bringing in economic benefit to the local communities at the same time. So you're required to have a local guide take you up the mountain. You can also hire a donkey with a guide if you want to help you get up the hill. And there's a system in the local community to make sure that those money-making opportunities are distributed through all the families in the area. What really struck me as we were sitting there in these butterfly reserves is that somewhere in those clusters was every single surviving monarch born in our backyard milkweed last fall. It really is an amazing concentration of all the monarchs from our area flying down there. And while it isn't known when or how monarch butterflies first came to the oil mill fir forest to overwinter, science have measured in detail the benefits the insects receive during their stay from November through March. So oil mill fir trees provide butterflies with buffers similar to white-tailed deer yarding up under conifers up here in the Northwoods. The boughs act as a blanket that prevents heat from escaping to the sky, and as an umbrella that reduces the amount of precipitation hitting the ground or their bodies. By forming clusters at intermediate heights above the ground, butterflies further avoid the sinking cold, the rain, or the clear night sky. So like flying squirrels huddling for warmth, the butterflies further increase their temperature moderation by forming thick clusters on the fir boughs. So this graphic shows the nighttime temperatures are warmer for monarchs who roost midway up trees in dense forests. That's the gist of this graphic. So the cold sinks, and so they don't want to be close to the ground. And up high at the top, the heat is escaping to the cold, starry sky, and there might be additional wind or rain up there too. So the monarchs really want to be in the middle, and the denser the boughs, the better, which of course is a problem when there's storms that knock down trees from wind and illicit logging and just other problems with the forests. Monarchs at the center of the cluster stay warmer overnight, protecting them from freezing. And in contrast, daytime temperatures inside the clusters are cooler than on the surface, which results in a lower body temperature and, like a hibernating bear, fewer calories burned. So we might think, oh, it's better to be warmer, but actually for butterflies, it's better to be cooler as long as you're not frozen. But on warm days, butterflies, especially on the outsides of the clusters, warm up enough to fly Some of this is normal, but too much activity will deplete their fat stores. And it's actually thought that butterflies who are seen feeding during the winter are so desperate for energy that they won't make it till spring migration. So there are quite a few flowers in the reserves, but it's not necessarily a happy thing to see the butterflies nectaring on them. And some trees are better than others. The trees are essentially big water bottles. With all that water in their trunks, they heat up and cool down more slowly than the air. And bigger trees have a bigger effect. The trunks heat up and cool down slowly, resulting in temperatures that are 8 degrees warmer than ambient at night and 11 degrees cooler during the day. And they also have more surface area for butterflies to cling to. Unfortunately, this is not my photo. I would have loved to see a hedgehog tree like that, just covered in butterflies. But almost all the butterflies we saw were in the clusters on branches. So 90% of the monarchs form clusters on the more abundant fir boughs. Butterflies who spend their time on trunks have a substantially higher survival rate, especially after bad weather. So the reserves would definitely benefit by more old growth trees. Bad weather isn't their only worry. Butterflies also have to dodge predators who have adapted to get past the milkweed poisons that the caterpillars eat and the butterflies retain. So this is a little array of dead monarchs. After our guide told me about these differences, I had him help me find monarchs who had been killed by all the different predators. So that upper left monarch, it was eaten by a black-eared mouse, and mice just chomp on the whole thing, mangle their bodies, and they tolerate the poison. They've actually developed a metabolic pathway similar to the monarchs themselves that helps them survive eating that cardiac, was it glyceroid? No, I'm forgetting the pronunciation of the toxin. Black-headed grosbeaks have that giant beak, and they eat the whole abdomen of the butterfly, just snip it right off. And they also tolerate the poison. And then black-backed orioles have that really needle-sharp beak. And so they actually do a little surgery. They dip inside the abdomen and just eat the fat-rich innards that don't have as many toxins. So each of these different predators have a different way of surviving the poisons in the monarchs. And predators eat about 15% of the colony every winter. In the past, thick old growth forests and big trees provided much better protection from weather and from the birds. And managing for big trees could help improve habitat in the butterfly reserves again. But there's only so much foresters can do in the face of climate change. You know, there's windstorms and fires and just changing in temperature and moisture regimes. So the temperatures and moisture levels that the trees and therefore the butterflies need to survive will soon be found only much higher up in the mountains. A study done in partnership with the Forest Service projected that by the end of the century, suitable habitat for the monarch butterfly may no longer occur inside the biosphere reserve. So is this the end of the monarchs? In response to that information, local researchers, conservation groups, and even school kids are growing oyamel for seedlings and planting them up to 1,300 feet higher in the mountains in existing sanctuaries, and also on Nevado de Tolca, which is a much higher peak in the Trans-Mexican Volcanic Belt that does not yet host butterflies. But monarchs need big trees, not baby ones. So can the forest grow fast enough? So butterflies need volcanoes, but they don't just need volcanoes. Monarchs also need people who care about them all over this continent. So throughout their whole migration route, all their homes and all year long, they need habitat. They need scientists and community scientists to learn more about their lives so that we can keep educating more people about how amazing they are. and their incredible migration. So good work to you and your community project, and all the scientists who are doing the tagging, mark, and recapture studies too to find out more. Let's not forget that everything is connected. The web of connections that keeps monarchs safe and healthy is the same web that holds and keeps humans safe and healthy too. If we protect the ecosystems that support monarchs, we might just end up saving the planet that supports us as well. So thank you. That's my main presentation. And now I saw some questions come through the chat. So we'll
Do you
go
want me
through.
to help pose them to you? I kind of jotted them down. I have them.
Yeah, sure. That'd be nice, Connie, if you want to read me the questions.
Okay. I'm going to invite Martin. Do you want to come off mute and ask your question about limits on the number of tourists?
Thank you, Connie, and thank you, Emily, for a wonderful presentation. My question is about if there's limits on people going to visit these locations where there are groups of monarch butterflies, because again, even though it's the idea is that to bring in tourist revenue to the area, I'm also concerned about like people going in and maybe interfering with the monarchs, and even just the waste that we bring in and just leaving of trash behind. Like, are there protections in place for these areas to make sure that the monarchs can do what they need to do over the winter periods?
Yeah, that's a great question. We certainly don't want to love them to death like we have so many of our national parks. I don't know if there is a hard limit on the number of people per day or anything. What I do know is that every group must have a local guide go with you. And so, you know, there are only so many local guides. That in itself would help limit the stream of people. And that local guide is also in charge of making sure people behave responsibly, leave no trace, not harassing the monarchs, and trying to keep the impact down. And, you know, that said, the monarchs in the trees, I can't imagine that we have much, if any, impact on disturbing them. You know, they're high up there. They're really focused on, you know, the reason they fly or don't fly is more about sunlight and temperature. I could see on a cold morning when monarchs have dropped to the ground because they got too cold to hold on to their tree, that people could potentially trample them accidentally. And that is something that our guide warned us about and sort of asked us to be respectful of watching our feet and not stepping on monarchs. We did see some impacts from a blowdown and some forest management, and certainly just like anywhere, you know, there's little visitor trails off the main trails and things like that. But overall, I was really impressed with how clean and tidy the forests were. I didn't see a lot of trash anywhere. And I also saw multiple people pick up trash that wasn't our own within our group and with just other random people too. So if there ever was trash on the ground, somebody was going to pick it up because this is a sacred site, both locally and internationally.
Yeah.
So I think I addressed your whole question. Yeah, thank you for asking that.
And quickly, I'll just add, Robert added in here that the area is chained off when he was there so that you can't get too close and you have to be quiet. So there's a lot of important things like that. For everyone's information, I'll let you know Lonnie has let us know that this was recorded and a link will be sent out in the future. 2 people asked this following question, so let's hit it. Your opinion on raising monarchs in captivity?
I think it has the potential to be a really great educational opportunity for kids. And I've read a lot about the potential for it being dangerous to monarchs too. From what I gather, if you collect a caterpillar and keep it away from the the caterpillars that are on your milkweed and you bring them and raise them away from the parasites. I don't think that that impacts their ability to navigate. It seems like it's when there's multiple generations raised in captivity, that's when it really impacts their navigational skills, as far as I understood. So there might be a scientist who has more nuanced information on that, but that's what I've understood from my research.
Thanks. Don, I want to thank you for adding in some help with the questions. And I'm wondering if you want to elaborate on your question or your comment on tagging on monarchs. If you want to come off mute and elaborate on that.
Oh, thank you for inviting me to comment. I was referring to the tag that appeared on the monarch on the mural in Engegeo. The tag noted to send the tag to the University of Toronto, which references my mentor, Dr. Fred Urquhart in Toronto, an early monarch researcher. And I made a note that Fred's tags are actually rectangular, not circular. It's quite interesting to see that the artist has created this very interesting tag in the mural.
That is interesting. I wonder, they must have combined two different tags in their artwork, which is something that artists have license to do, I guess.
Exactly.
We had a question from Sarah. Did you feel safe, your personal safety in the community where you were at?
Yeah, it's interesting. We had some people actually back out of the trip because they read what the State Department says about Mexico, which isn't always very nice. But Holbrook was really fantastic about helping us find places to stay that felt really safe, and then having our own guide who was bilingual and our own bus. It all felt really safe. So we stayed at a very nice hotel in Mexico City as we started to get acclimatized to the elevation. And it was a little disconcerting from our rooftop restaurant, which was fantastic. Their croissants in the morning and stuff are amazing. But we could actually see quite a few like armed police down below us with crazy big guns and stuff. It would have been more scary, except I know I felt a whole lot of white privilege, and they were there to protect us so that they don't lose out on that money for tourism. And it was the same at the reserves. There were some armed guards, and I felt like they were there to protect us and the tourism dollars we were bringing to the community. So I felt an incredible amount of white privilege, which is sometimes uncomfortable, but also I did feel safe. Two of our participants did come a few days early and hang out in Mexico City on their own, and they did somehow get swept up into a big political demonstration, a bunch of people walking through the street, and they had an iPhone stolen. And so things like that can happen, and they admitted that they just weren't aware enough. But when we had our guide with us, who had sort of the background knowledge of where to go so that we didn't get swept up into places that were a little bit more chaotic, we were just fine. It was really a good experience. And the reason that we did this trip in 2022 is that Mexico had pretty good COVID protections in place and wasn't having a major outbreak. So we also felt really good with the COVID precautions that were in place while we were there.
That's heartening and disheartening all together at the same time.
It's complicated.
Yeah. Rick and Jeanette asked, why do monarchs migrate in the same direction across multiple generations before reversing and coming back? Do you want to, is the question clear? Or should we ask them to come off mute? And
well, I think there might be, I think he may have his facts a little bit off, because the same monarch will migrate all the way south, right? And then the females will migrate just a little way back north. So we can, let's see, I have there. So the same individual is migrating all the way from us down to Mexico, and then the females migrate just enough into Texas so that they can find the milkweed. And so, but they are, well, I guess the multiple generations is on the way north. There's multiple generations.
Mhm.
And then they're triggered to go south again. So there is that. That's where the multiple generations come in. We don't really know, except that like so many things in nature, they are triggered by day length to start the reverse, and also temperature cues, and maybe some of the cues in the milkweed quality as well. And it's just one of those mysteries of life and how they evolved like that. Our guide also had an interesting hypothesis that they are actually migrating in a clockwise direction. So they're heading north and east, and then south and west. And so that was a really interesting hypothesis too. And I think there was some science behind maybe why that would make it easier for them, or how they would follow the sun or something, you know, have a habit of keeping the sun always over one shoulder. But the short answer is we don't really know. Like so much in migration, we don't really know.
Yeah. And there was some questions. There was just recently a question came and hit. Judith asked, have you visited the winter places in California or Florida?
So yeah, when I was a teenager, gosh, maybe like 16 or something, we spent Christmas with our California relatives and went to the Monterey colony. I remember it being amazing, and how amazed my great aunt Eleanor was too. Yeah. But I haven't been there recently, and I haven't been to, well, I was in Florida in kindergarten in the winter, but I don't remember any butterflies. I just remember feeding bread to seagulls. So yeah.
Yeah. Let me check here. There's a brand new one. And there's a lot of acolytes in here for you as well. The newest question I see is it true that when you plant a native plant area, it may take several seasons or years for monarchs to find these gardens?
I don't know. That's a great question for some of your wild ones experts. I would guess it seems like it could go either way to me.
Yeah. And Mary Lou Worley, thank you for your comment on bicycling. She said it would be an exciting complementary read to read Bicycling with Butterflies. And many of you may remember that we had that author as a guest and a program in a Zoom prior to tonight, a few years ago.
Yeah, I listened to that audiobook both before and after I got back from Mexico. It was wonderful. I just saw a question too about how, if only the females fly back from Mexico, how do the eggs get fertilized? So the males and females mate on the winter preserves, and then the males die there. The females fly north and lay their eggs, and those eggs contain both male and female butterflies. So from there, you have a full population to keep moving north, and they will keep breeding and laying eggs and moving north too. It's just that the males who overwintered don't make it, but their genes are carried north.
It's incredible. I want oh yeah, thank you for the name, Don. Sarah Dykman is Bicycling with Butterflies. That's a
Yeah.
fun book. I will pause. We have a few minutes. It's not even quite 8 o'clock where we were going to cut off. Here's a new one. Do you see Jean's question there?
Oh, I'm just scrolling back, so I'll scroll down.
Regarding the question whether monarchs find milkweed you plant locally the first season you plant it. Yes, they did. She was thrilled. I'm glad to hear that you had good luck with it. So Robert is asking, are there super males and super females? Can you comment on that?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Robert, come on off mute and ask it again if you'd like to, and add a little bit to it.
So I was just at Pismo Beach and I saw the monarchs in the trees clustered, and a lot of them were mating. So I said, where do these males come from? And the volunteer guide told me, well, silly, there's super females and super males. I had never heard that. I thought there was only super females. But I said, well, how did the males get there? You know, in the winter. And that's what she told me. So that was interesting.
Yeah, as far as I know, I mean, those males were born in the north in August, and they flew south with the females. They overwinter as pre-adolescents, and then this time of year is when they fully mature and then mate, and then the males die. I mean, I would say any female is a super female in my opinion.
Well, I guess they live, what, 4 times longer, so the
Oh, is that okay? That's the
typical
definition.
monarch lives about 6 weeks,
Mhm.
but the, you know, the super females live 6 months, which is 4 times longer.
Sure. Yeah, and the
So
super
you said
males,
there were super males who lived longer too.
yeah, they live
Okay.
just a few weeks shorter than the super females.
Yeah. Yeah, and I had the opportunity, like you, I was blessed to go to Mexico,
Nice.
but I really liked Pismo Beach, which is halfway in between Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Mm.
You can do a tour of the Hearst Castle, but we stayed right in Pismo Beach, and you walk a mile on the sand and you'd be at the preserve. It wasn't near as big, and there weren't as near many monarchs, but you could see them in the clusters. You could see them fly. There was a nice little souvenir shop where I bought everything. So it was very nice. If anyone, you know, is worried about going to Mexico and wants to see the monarchs, I definitely recommend Pismo Beach.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And speaking of souvenir shop, I wanted to show off my water glass for tonight. This is one of the many souvenirs I bought at the little shops at the
Wow.
preserves to help support the local economy. The trick was finding stuff that I could fit into my already stuffed suitcase, but the mug worked.
Well, I think we're good. I love your questions. Such a rich bunch of people here with this interest, adding a little bit more for all of us to enjoy. If you want to come off, put your screens on. We can all give her a hand, and I will say there's so many thank yous for the presentation. I just have a final comment. I'll say. Caring for the land is all of our responsibilities now. And it's so important, not only for us humans, but for all the species. And one thing, there's a quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she says that for us, we can all become indigenous. Indigenous means living in a place as if it's your children's future. And it matters to take care of the land for our lives, both material and spiritual, and for all those who depend on it. So we can all become indigenous by caring for the land as an indigenous community would. And it seems like we are kind of all like-minded here, so I think we're already on the road. Hopefully we'll have good numbers to next year.
Yeah, good work. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all the wonderful work you're doing to support monarchs and all the other pollinators too. It's really wonderful what you're doing.
Chris can come up and clap for her.
Yeah, fantastic. Really well done.
Yeah, it was fascinating. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you to all of you for being here so very much.
Thank you, Connie.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.